Paris, 1953. While the city buzzed beneath the Eiffel Tower, a tiny car quietly stole the show at the Motor Show. Just over 1,200 pounds, 110 horsepower. This car wasn't loud, but it was deadly serious. This was the Porsche 550 Spyder. It's small but fierce, mid-engine, razor sharp, and built to win. It didn't just compete, it knocked giants off their feet and made Porsche a name to watch. But this isn't just a racing story. It's about fame, tragedy, and a legacy tied forever to James Dean, the car that burned rubber and hearts alike. Buckle up, because this ride's about to get unforgettable. But before the fame, before the checkered flags and Hollywood headlines, we need to rewind to where it all began. Because the 550 Spyder didn't just appear out of thin air, it was born from Porsche's obsession with precision and a few bold experiments that dared to chase something faster, lighter, and smarter. Back in 1951, Porsche was already dipping its toes into lightweight racing with the 356 and a few wild one-offs like the Glockler Spyder. These cars were nimble, scrappy, and surprisingly quick enough to give Ferry Porsche and his team a glimmer of what was possible if they pushed a little bit further. That push led to a clean sheet idea. Build a purpose-built race car from the ground up. No compromises, no road car routes, just speed. The result? The Porsche 550. Erwin Commenda took charge of the bodywork, shaping an aluminum skin that looked like it had been carved by the wind. Underneath was a tubular ladder chassis, a featherweight skeleton that kept the car stiff but incredibly light. Later on, that evolved into the 550A's space frame, but even the early setup was ahead of its time. And then came the heart of the beast, a 1.5-liter Type 547 flat 4. This wasn't your average four-banger. Designed by Ernst Fuhrmann, it had dual overhead cams, gear-driven timing, and about 110 horsepower of pure defiance. It revved high, ran hot, and had mechanics both swooning and swearing. If the early engineering of the 550 Spyder was its birth, racing was its baptism by fire, and fire suited it just fine. The first three prototypes rolled out as coupes with removable hardtops, but 550-03 made history when it shed its top and hit the Nuremberg Ring in May of 1953, winning on its very first outing. That was the spark. Soon the 550 was taking class wins at Le Mans and the grueling Carrera Panamericana, the latter so special to Porsche that Carrera would live on as a badge of honor for its future performance cars. From 1953 to 1957, the 550 Spyder evolved with every race. The Silverworks cars were instantly recognizable by colored spears on their rear fenders, making it easy for the pit crew to tell them apart mid-battle. And if you were lucky enough to spot Hans Hermann's red-tailed number 41, chances are you were looking at the back of a winner. For such a small production run, just 90 cars in total, the 550 punched way above its weight. It was almost always in the top three of its class, and at Le Mans, it was only beaten twice among the smaller cars, one of those wins overturned by disqualification. The upgraded 550A of 1956, with its lighter and stiffer space frame chassis, even gave Porsche its very first overall victory in a major event, the legendary Targa Florio. Porsche was also breaking new ground off the track, becoming the first manufacturer to land race sponsorships, starting with Fletcher Aviation, then later Telefunken and Castrol. And while the factory team eventually moved on to the 718 in 1957, the 550 story didn't end. Privateers kept racing them, often driving them to the track, racing, then driving them home again. One even ended up in the hands of Yugoslav leader Josip Broz Tito, whose driver Milivoje Bolsic took it to multiple wins, including a European hill climb championship in 1960. The 550's DNA lived on well beyond its production run in the 718 RSK, the RS60 and RS61, and decades later, Porsche would pay tribute with cars like the Boxster S 550 Spyder, and even the RS Spyder Le Mans prototype. But make no mistake, the legend was born here in these furious, tire-squealing years. The The 550 Spyder was already a legend on the track, but for many, its story isn't just about trophies and lap times. It's tied forever to a Hollywood star whose life burned just as brightly and ended just as suddenly. James Dean might have been the face of a generation, but behind the camera, his heart beat to the sound of an engine at full song. Acting paid the bills, sure, but racing was his real love. Most of his Hollywood paychecks went straight into high-end sports cars, and he wasn't just buying them to admire in a garage, he was taking them to the track and winning. Out there, he wasn't James Dean the actor, he was just another racer chasing the limit. That love affair with Porsche began in March of 1955 when Dean traded his 53 MG TD for a brand new Porsche Speedster. He drove it hard, pushing it to its limits, and in race after race, he proved he had the skill to match the hunger. Before long, he admitted he was under the spell of racing and it wasn't a passing phase. On September 21st of 1955, fresh from filming Giant and with a good paycheck in his pocket, Dean walked back into the same showroom where he'd bought the Speedster. This time, the car waiting for him was a 550 Spyder, light, mid-engined, and lethal in the right hands. He was just 24 years old, and for him, this wasn't just a purchase, it was a promise to go faster than ever before. The Spyder didn't stay anonymous for long. Dean's stunt driver, friend Bill Hickman, gave him the nickname Little Bastard. The name stuck, and Dean had it painted across the back of his Porsche. Along with the racing number 130 on its body, the car now carried his personality as much as it carried him. Dean even bought a 55 Ford Country Squire wagon to tow the Spyder to races. But on September 30th of 1955, as he prepared to head to Salinas for the weekend's events, his mechanic Rolf Vutherick suggested they drive the car instead. The Porsche hadn't clocked enough break-in miles to qualify for the race, and this was the perfect opportunity to change that. Dean agreed. They set off from Hollywood around 2 p.m., Vutherick in the passenger seat, while Hickman and photographer Sanford H. Roth followed behind in the Ford. Just before 6 p.m. on U.S. Route 466, they met tragedy. A black and white Ford Tudor driven by Donald Turnipspeed began turning left across the highway to head north toward Fresno. Dean, an experienced driver, spotted the danger instantly and tried to steer around it. But there was no room and no time. The cars collided at high speed, the Spyder cartwheeling before coming to a rest at the roadside. The Ford was shoved into the opposite lane by the force of the crash. Witnesses ran to help. One with medical training found Dean still with a faint pulse, his foot wedged between the clutch and brake pedals. His injuries were severe, broken neck and multiple fractures, and it took time to extract him from the twisted wreck. Hickman arrived about 10 minutes later and helped pull his friend free, but by the time the ambulance reached the hospital, Dean was gone. He died in Hickman's arms at just 24. The Porsche, however, was beyond saving, and in that moment the little bastard stopped being just a car and became a haunting symbol, forever tying the legacy of the 550 Spyder to the short, brilliant life of James Dean. Time may have moved on and Porsche's stable may be filled with faster, flashier machines today, but for collectors and purists, the 550 Spyder is still the holy grail. Because when a legend is this rare, every surviving piece becomes priceless. Only about 90 Porsche 550 Spyders were ever built between 1953 and 1956. That's it. Each one handcrafted, each one carrying a sliver of motorsport history under its skin, whether it's the original 110 horsepower 550 or the slightly hotter 550A with up to 135 horses, these cars aren't just vintage, they're revered. So how much does it cost to own one of those myth makers today? Well, bring your checkbook and maybe your soul, because depending on the car's race history and condition, auction prices often land somewhere between $4 and $6 million, and some have gone even higher. And let's be honest, at that level, you're not buying a car. You're buying a story, a legacy, and a seat in the Porsche Hall of Fame. Of course, owning a real 550 Spyder is a dream reserved for the ultra-lucky or ultra-loaded, but here's the good news. You don't need $6 million to get a taste of the legend, because over the years, a handful of passionate builders have kept the 550 spirit alive through faithful, high-quality replicas. Names like Beck Spyder, Vintage Motorcars, Thunder Ranch, and Kamonix might not be from Stuttgart, but they've built some seriously convincing recreations. These replicas capture the look, feel, and driving thrill of the original without the stress of needing a private security detail every time you park it. Most are built on Volkswagen underpinnings, but you'll also find options with Subaru Flat 4s or even Porsche power plants, depending on your wallet and sense of adventure. The prices are anywhere from $35,000 to $80,000. Beck replicas, for example, often hover around $50,000 to $60,000, depending on the specs. Thunder Ranch builds with 1914cc engines are also out there, offering a more raw analog experience with serious cool factor. So if you got the love but not the millions, don't worry. You can still feel what it's like to slide into that low-slung cockpit, hear the engine bark behind you, and take on corners with that same rebel spirit, just minus the auction paddle. Now, if you've made it this far, thanks for riding along. If you love this trip through time, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dive car stories, and drop a comment below. What's your favorite 550 Spyder moment? Is it the racing, James Dean, or maybe it's that first time you saw one and thought, yeah, that's the one. Until next time, stay fast, stay curious.